to all of you and available for 90 days after the conference is over. I'll be putting more in the chat on how to get to those resources later. Good afternoon. My name is Lori Barnett, and I am the Director of Professional Development at Quality Matters. I'm so happy to be with all of you this afternoon. This is Student Perceptions of QM Standards on Engagement and Learning. And I am your room host this afternoon, but we're going to get started. And I am going to turn the session over to our presenters, Daisy Barreto and Sheri Conklin, and they will walk us through today's agenda.
Thank you so much, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Daisy Barreto. I am an associate professor at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And with me today is my colleague and co-presenter, Sheri Conklin. She is here at somewhere, whatever you are in your screen. Sheri is also an associate professor at UNCW with me. And it is a pleasure to present with you on the topic of student perceptions of QM standards on engagement and learning. Both Sheri and I are former instructional designers, so this is very near and dear to our heart. We know that many faculty cannot create a QM course immediately, so we wanted to garner the students' perspectives, to find out the areas of importance, what is really matter for the students. And in this presentation, we will explore the importance of this topic, the research that we conduct in this area, and some practical tips based on the students' response. Feel free to ask questions in the chat or share your thoughts throughout the presentation. Next, Sheri. And so I would like to start our presentation by introducing you to Sarah, who is a fictional character, but she can provide or she can give us light on the importance of this topic. Sarah is a second-year grad student enrolled in an online course, having taken several online courses before. She is very familiar with the varying levels of course design and instructor engagement. But one of her pet peeves with online courses is how to stay engaged in them. She often spent more time trying to decipher what is expected than actually learning. She also does understand how the instructional materials in the course support her knowledge to complete the assignments. So based on your experience about QM or even course design in general, how can a course design impact Sarah's engagement and learning? And please feel free to share your thoughts on the chat. Like, what do you think that why does course design matter and how does that impact your learning? So take maybe 1 minute to think and type it up on the chat. What do you think? And then we're gonna go to the next slide to really talk about this in just a second. Yes, I like that consistency helps students know where to get information. They only have to learn once. They don't have to, especially if they are in a program and taking multiple courses, they don't have to learn to navigate the course and also learn the content. And if there's nothing else, we can move to the next slide, but feel free to type it up what you think it is important, why it is important. So let's go ahead and examine why course design is important. A well-structured online course are crucial for effective learning. They provide that clear roadmap and a logical flow for students. So they know the direction, they know where to go, and as some of you mentioned here about that consistent, that organization, this enhances the learning experience by reducing any confusion. It also improves their learning and retention, make the content more manageable, right? So if you're segmenting that content for them, they know that they have module 1, module 2, module 3. It also sets clear expectation and easy navigation. especially in all of this, like increase that student engagement and motivation, leading them to better learn outcomes through effective knowledge and transfer, and at the same time also activating their learning. And additionally, good structure improves accessibility for diverse students and streamlines the course management for instructors. Lastly, a well-structured online course benefits both students and instructors. So it's not just the student per se, but also the instructor, because they also have to start grading those courses or ensure where students are in that learning path. So having those mechanisms, having that structure is streamlined not only for students, but also the instructors as well, leading to a more successful and satisfying learning experience. Next. So our study was a recreation of Sadaf and colleagues study. They have examined student perceptions of the impact of QM certified courses on students' learning and engagement. And they had 50 grad students enrolled in online courses, completed a survey developed based on the QM rubric items. And the students rate in their study, like the students rate course activities and learning interactions to have the highest impact on both students' learning and engagement. On our study, we also sought to answer the core questions, which were, how do QM standards impact students' perceptions of their learning, and how do these standards influence their engagement? Next. And I think Sheri, you can speak on that one.
Okay, yes. So we're going to give you a preview into, we recreated Sadif and colleagues study and on the 6th edition, and then we expanded the study and did a 3rd study. So you actually get a preview into the paper that's under review. So this was all graduate students enrolled in, they were not QM certified programs, whereas Sadif's program was QM certified. And so the 3 programs that we sent the survey out to was the Masters of Nurse Educator, Healthcare Administration, and Instructional Technology. And we had 42 students complete the survey. So we found that the results were very different than Sadif's study. So students rated accessibility and usability as the most impactful on their learning, and that was followed closely by assessment and measurement. And they emphasized how clear instructions, accessible materials, and alignment of objectives with assessments really helped them succeed. So if we look at this graph, all of the general standards were ranked fairly high, except for learner support. And we have to remember that these are graduate students who are typically self-motivated and they don't need as many external supports often. But you can see that the 2 high ones were the accessibility and assessment and measurement, which, you know, really we were thinking that the highest one would be for learning would be course activities and interaction. So based on these results, if you could just throw into the chat maybe 1 or 2 things that you would, if you were working with a faculty who wanted to improve their course, you know, where should they start when they're influencing student learning? Because, you know, there's a lot of components to creating a QM certified course. And so, you know, where do we start? Like if it's something that you're going to do over time and maybe work with the faculty to improve their course, or you are a faculty and you say, well, I can't do it all in one summer because I'm not here. I'm going to make these improvements this semester, make some other improvements the next semester. Where would you tell them to start? Now, the course objectives do have to lay the foundation to align the activities. But also, you know, when we're looking at like, why does accessibility seem so high for students? And we'll keep moving on. So these is a more granular look at which specific review standards rank the highest. And notice that students ranked 6 accessibility specific review standards is impacting their learning a lot. And first and foremost, so students need to know what to do first. Therefore, specific review standard 1.1 ranked the absolute highest. And I agree, accessibility does help everyone feel welcome and valued, because you never know, especially with our adult learners. For me, we didn't have the supports when I went through school a long time ago. And so some adults may not even know that maybe they have an information processing disorder and they need to have text and audio at the same time. So I found it very interesting that the accessibility came out on top. So we also had an open-ended question that asked students to describe which strategies impacted their learning the most. And when it came to learning and them describing what really impacted them, it was overwhelmingly pointed to course activities and learner interaction, which is interesting. What they described was the course activities, but they also described accessibility and usability. And again, that emphasizes the importance of creating the seamless, inclusive online experiences. And so I pulled a couple quotes. One student said, "Because I'm a visual learner, this kind of resource, audio, video, provides a visual means to learn and review material." And another student said, "A clear outline of the course in each module helps me understand what is expected of me." Even though we know the expectations are based on the course goals, the module objectives, and then, aligning all of the materials to the module objectives, which are mapped to the course goals, just having the outline for students. So even working with faculty and saying, let's start here and let's make an outline, and then we'll keep working on this. And so here were our student perceptions of learning and the percentage. So accessibility and usability were the highest, with course interactions being next. And then instructional materials also really rates high. So students are looking for, and I think because of the technology coming out where you have your ebooks and you can have instructor created presentations, that they're looking for a variety of ways to ingest your instructional content. I'm going to pass the ball back to Daisy.
Thank you. So now we're going to really take a look at students' perceptions of engagement. And engagement in online learning thrives on interaction, right? So we can think of like interactive elements such as quizzes, multimedia, encouraging students participation with the materials. So peer collaboration, discussion, group projects, all fosters like that sense of community and provides opportunities for that shared learning and support experience. So the students in this study, they rated course activities and learning interactions the highest, with surprisingly accessibility and usability being the second. In our previous study, and this is just one thing, and I know Sheri is going to be talking more about this, we have conducted a previous study in the same question, same purpose, but was just with instructional designers. And for them, assessment and measure and learning objectives were the highest. And I think, especially as some of you pointed out here, that the key of learning objectives, because they're instructional designers, they know that objectives are key, and then so is the assessment. That alignment for them was very clear. But now that we're putting the mix here, students from other disciplines, that for them, what we learn as instructional designers, those components might not be the same, right? Like they don't see the same way, because they're coming with the perspective of truly a learner. And then for some of the other study that we've done, when you're talking with prospective instructional designers, they get that better sense in that context. Next slide, Sheri. So for engagement, students rate course activities and learning interaction as the highest, with, as I mentioned before, with accessibility and usability falling close behind, and activities tied directly to learning outcomes and interactive elements were key drivers to their engagement. As you can see here, the lowest were learner support and course technology. And as Sheri mentioned again, not only these are grad students, but then the other point here, I do think that when they thought of like course technology and learner support, that's not where the majority of the engagement is happening for them in the courses. Next, Sheri. And so on that, this is like also our interactive moment here that we're gonna ask you to think a moment, just because we're not just want to dump the content on you, but we also wanted to bring you to start thinking about this. What does this find mean to you in maybe a course that you either design or that you're teaching, and maybe what change you would make it based on these findings, right? Knowing that accessibility is important, right? Course activity is important. How would you start thinking about your design? What would you go about it? And then as Sheri pointed out, this can also be reflective too. You know, if you feel like I don't want to share anything, but I just want you to at least think about it and think about what this means. Because even for us, as we start engaging in this process of the research, we are also start to thinking ways of changing our courses and making some adjustments to really tap into the needs of the students. Next, thank you, Sheri. So regarding the gender standard, there were 13 SRS that students rank a lot or above, like 59% on their impact of engagement. So 4 of those were accessibility and usability gender standards, as shown here in the graph. But overall, students highly value accessibility and usability of course design for engagement. Within the accessibility and usability gender standards, the highest rated item were course navigations, facilitating the ease of use, and the lowest was the providing vendor accessibility statements for course technology. The highest rated item within the learning activities and learning interactions, where the requirements for learning interactions are clearly stated. And another area that it was highly ranked was under the General Standard 1, course overview and introduction. Instructions make it clear how to get started, where to find various components, etc. And what I think is just interesting to point out here, especially on that clearly stated in terms of like engagement. I'm always surprised about like, sometimes when we have discussions and the students don't know sometimes how many do they need to reply or how many do they have to engage. And so if you have clear expectations, how you should participate in a course or how should you engage with your peers, this is going to help them understand that community and participation interaction with their peers as well. And next, Sheri. So in terms of the open-ended questions, we did have course activities and learning interactions being some of the ones that they mentioned the most. And some of the examples that they provided to us was including hosting live office hours and providing engaging materials were such as lectures and PowerPoint to clarify key points from the weekly module were important for them, offering a variety of activities beyond discussion boards, project-based learning. And then in terms of instructional materials, some of the examples that students shared with us were written instructions. They use LinkedIn Learning as part of the course, reference to specific textbook chapters, being very specific where they should engage within the text and content, instructional videos for more challenging and hands-on activities on how to use certain software such as Excel or authoring tool, and etc. Next, Sheri. So, and then here we have some of the a quote from one of the students that share on their open-ended questions. So where they say, professor engagement and level of care of the course are important. The more engagement and quality of feedback from them, the more I want to engage in the course. So even the feedback that the instructor is providing on the grading is important for students, as not only they can improve their assignment next time, but also understanding what are the areas where they need to grow and maybe tap into that information. Next, Sheri. And I think I'll pass the ball back to you.
Yes. So, could it be, since these are graduate students, that the focus was more on the instructional materials? Graduate students are expected to work more independently and rely on instructional materials provided by the instructor to guide their learning. They were also focused on having a clear connection between learning objectives and assessments. And this could also be because some of the students were instructional technology students. And, of course, most students do want to have clear expectations of grading and feedback, whether that is undergraduate or graduate. So we're going to start looking at some comparisons here. So our first study only included the students of Master's in Instructional Technology, and that was with the 6th edition of the rubric. When we started to launch the second one, where we wanted to expand our student population, was when the rubric changed to the 7th edition. That was not by our design. That's just when it happened. So we included the students from the other graduate programs, and because of the time, we did use the most recent edition of the rubric. But there's a big difference in the 6th and 7th, and with the different populations, even from the course overview and introduction, the course activities and learning interactions, both in engagement and learning, instructional materials, still that went up much higher. And again, student support was ranked lowest consistently. So, one of those things is, if I'm trying to redesign my course and it is a graduate, I'm going to probably focus on making sure my content is accessible, that, I have the foundation of my course goals and that the items are mapped out to the best of ability. And I say that I have QM certified courses, but when you make changes, to make a couple changes takes a really long time to go back and review, your map and where everything fits and then what you take out. So it's, and so speaking from the faculty side, small changes can be big impacts, but also very time consuming. So here is a graph of learning, and this now includes all 3 studies over time. Again, so SADIF was in 2018. That obviously was the 6th edition, and then we had the 2022, which is a 6th edition, and 2024 with our 7th edition. And you can see that the learning objectives, all of them were pretty high with SADIF, but then we had learning objectives went up a lot, and the course overview went up quite a bit in 2024. Accessibility has definitely improved significantly. This maybe suggests that students are increasingly recognizing the benefits of the inclusive and well-structured course materials. And again, these are graduate students, so it'd be interesting to see how this looks from an undergraduate perspective, because they don't have the same kind of foundation as our graduate students. So we want to focus on maintaining strong, in the future, strong learner support. And again, these are fully online programs, so they may feel that they got support in that introductory course and have a program orientation, whereas most undergraduate students do not. Now, if we look at engagement, it's strongly influenced by most of the general standards, again, except for learner support. Accessibility and course activities ranked extremely high. Assessment ranked high in our 2nd study, but really decreased in the 3rd study. So it looks like they were really be more insightful. And again, we brought in nurse educators and healthcare administrators. So assessment really stood out also during our first study, and it just, yeah, not sure if they just weren't looking at the feedback as much. So with any research, our study had quite a few limitations, but we are going to only focus on two. Our participants were from non-QM certified programs, but they are influenced by Quality Matters, all of them. It's just that we had not gone through the process. The sample size is relatively small. It was a very long survey with over 88 questions, so we had a very high drop off. So we need to figure out how to get these student perceptions with a smaller survey.
And bringing back here Sarah's case again. So let's recap some of the things that we really found out from our research. There are several areas that students point out where instructors and course designers can focus on, especially regarding to the impact on their learning and engagement. And although engagement is typically associated with course activities, we found that there were other areas such as accessibility, alignment, to focus on. If you are getting started with a new course or redesigning an old one. This also highlights the importance of considering these factors when designing or redesigning a course, even before focusing heavily on specific activities. So I know that you don't have to design for Sarah, but if you have a student like Sarah in your course, or if you are working with a faculty member that may have experience with students or have a course already set up, and if they're thinking about like improving their course, maybe those are areas that it might be good to take a look and see how can that be improved for learners to have like a better learning experience. Next. And I think this is on you, Sheri.
I keep forgetting to unmute. So I'm going to put a Padlet in the chat if anybody wants to add to this. So thinking about what this means for our practice as educators and designers, prioritizing accessibility and usability is critical. Students are they value clarity and the ease of navigation. There are many tools to assist with accessible courses, and maybe share some strategies on the chat that you have done or seen that would assist with creating accessible content. I know, for us, every time I add a video, I have to take like 3 extra steps to get it closed captioned, but thankfully our institution offers a closed captioning system. I've been working with our LMS administrator on, instead of using icons that have to be, have alt text, where the icons are embedded into the code. And so it just shows up in the code, of course, but then, if you're looking at a typical faculty, let's say someone who is history, they're not going to want to get into HTML coding. And so we also have to think about the maintenance and, how can this faculty continue to improve their course, continue to make it accessible, but also ensure that they can maintain that on their own.
And then because assessment and measurement also emerge as a crucial factor with students particularly valuing clear descriptive criteria for evaluation, this finding reinforced the importance of aligning assessment with learning objectives as a key principle in instructional design that has been shown to improve student learning and outcomes. So as the students value clear descriptive criteria for evaluation, and I know that I'm maybe preaching here to the choir, implementing grading rubrics assistance on what they can expect regarding their evaluation or regarding their assignment submission. And even if you're not designing this for your own course, but you are working with faculty, and I know that Sheri and I, we have worked with faculty that they don't like rubrics, they talk about the prescriptive nature of rubrics. But for students that may be on a very tight schedule, that they only have a certain time of the day to dedicate to the course, providing that clear and providing that clear and specific expectations that the instructor have is definitely going to help them to be more successful in what they need to deliver as part of their final assignment for a course or for a course activity. Next.
So, one of the other, things that came out of this is, showcasing alignment. And I think there's multiple ways to showcase alignment. Here's a numbering system, but if anybody has other methods they have used to showcase alignment, I would love to see that in the chat, because I think this is one of the most reflective things for faculty going through, and then maybe giving them options of what is meaningful for them to be able to showcase the alignment that the students would also understand. And if we go back to what Daisy was just saying about how some faculty don't want to use rubrics because they're prescriptive. This faculty member I worked with said, I don't need a rubric. I know what an A paper looks like. And he was also the same person who said, I don't need to put course goals on my syllabus because I tell them on the first day of class. So, we've all worked with those faculty, but I think it's interesting to see all the different ways that, alignment can be demonstrated in a course. All right. And then, some of the other implications for instructional designers and educators aiming to improve the quality of online courses, especially in regards to engagements, to align those course activities. And we all know this, learning outcomes. So as this online learning continues to grow, hopefully these insights can guide the development of courses. And I think it's also being able to say to some faculty, hey, look, here's a couple studies that have been done, and this is really important to students because sometimes telling them just isn't enough. And we also saw, a couple of things that transparent and consistent communication between the instructors, which kind of comes outside the course design, but you can build in mechanisms into your course design to ensure that there is that transparent, consistent communication. And so we are early and we have plenty of time for questions if anybody has any, but we invite you to think about, courses that you're working on with faculty, your own courses, which standards resonate most with your students. How can you amplify or work with faculty to amplify their learning engagement for their students? And the one article that is published is there with the QR code if anybody's interested. And like I said, our second one is under review. So at this point, we'll just open it up for questions.
Please use the chat or unmute if you'd like to speak and ask a question, but we do have plenty of time left.
I have a question about your survey instrument. I heard you say that it was very long. So did you ask them a question for every specific review standard?
Yes. Because, yeah, so it was at the time 42, 84 questions plus 2 open-ended questions.
Oh, so there were 2 questions for every specific review standard plus the open-ended questions. Okay, I can see why that happened.
Yes.
A lot of them abandoning the survey. Did you incentivize completion of the survey in any way?
Yes, we actually did get a grant and we tried to incentivize it and it just wasn't enough of an incentive.
I see, yeah. And have you considered using this with undergraduates?
I think that would be very interesting, especially because they're the larger population, but we would have to really revamp of like how we would collect that information because I think even 25 questions is too long for undergraduates. They're surveyed to death with everything.
Yeah, this has been really interesting, and it's something that here at QM we always are interested in because we obviously what we're doing is to improve the learning experience for students as our mission in these online courses. And so thinking about how others who are in even this Zoom room, I'm curious if others are attempting to do this kind of research, which is super important for not only for your own institution, but for just broadly for the community to understand broadly what is impactful for learners. So I'm interested in hearing about if other people have started to do any of this kinds of research to survey your students. And I'm also thinking about like the 84 question problem. And maybe you can maybe it's not done at the end, and maybe it's at periodic, administered periodically, like a set. But I guess it's going to give you kind of skewed information if you do it not all at the same time.
And I'm wondering if like something along the lines of maybe a description of the general standards for undergraduate, and then having them maybe do, unfortunately, more open-ended responses and then ask for volunteers to do a more in-depth interview and just be a lot more qualitative.
Yeah, that could be really insightful as well to have some roundtables or small groups. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Barry, there have been some chat posts if you've seen those.
What is it, Elizabeth? I see breakdown for first gen URM. I'm sorry if I don't know. What's URM? Remedial. Oh, thank you. Interesting to see, how the different groups view standards.
Yeah, I think like that's a good point. And then maybe one of the things that Sheri and I can speak about was, and again, we only had 2 students from not this study that we are presenting here, but from a previous study, the previous study. And I think some of these divergence, in terms of like groups, we could see when they were talking with us about how they perceive what was important for their learning. But again, it was just 2 students that volunteered to be on the focus group interview, or no, the individual interview. But it was interesting to see, and then maybe having exactly what you said, maybe tapping into what are the difference between the groups and how those change their perception of learning engagement within an online course.
And I will say, we've engaged in some other studies, but one of the things that Daisy and I've been working on is like how to facilitate an online course. And some of those studies that came out, it was we didn't want to include course design because we felt like course design and course facilitation are 2 different skill sets. And but what came out of it was the students said if a course was well designed, they immediately felt that the instructor cared about them because they took the time. And I thought that was really interesting. So we've incorporated course organization into part of our facilitation that we're working on as well. But the fact that they felt like they cared, like it actually brings that more emotion. It was on instructor social connectedness. So I think that's also something to consider. And those will be coming out hopefully soon too.
Sheri, you may have told us, but what was the survey tool you guys used again?
So we took the specific review standards and, just paraphrased them for the students and just said, reflect on this. Tell me
Okay.
what it means a lot to you. But I would not do that again. But we did want to recreate study as she did it to see if we had similar results. But you just don't get the response. And so you have to wonder, what else, could we do to actually really get some good information? I think we have good information to go on and be good to then maybe even do interviews or even with undergraduates, be like, this is really important to some people. Tell me what you think. Learning objectives. They're probably a history undergraduate, I know I keep going back to history, or mathematics major would say, what's a learning objective?
Did you use like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, or what did you use for your platform?
We have Qualtrics that we use through the university.
Okay, thanks.
We have just a few minutes left. Anything else? Any other questions? Very nicely done, Sheri and Daisy. Thank you so much. Attendees, any other questions? Again, there's access to all the videos from the sessions and the materials, the handouts, the slides. And so that'll be available for 90 days after today's sessions are over. And if there's nothing else, we can wrap up and give you a couple minutes before the next session starts. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheri and Daisy will also save the chat. So the chats will also be available in case you want to browse back through some of the comments and some, different things. So